Welcome to the Entree Pastors Podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello and welcome to the Entree Pastors Podcast on YouTube. My name is John. I'm one of the co-hosts of the show, and we've got an incredible guest to share with you in this week's episode. You're going to hear from a pastor who built a six-figure business out of his home, repairing screens on phones and tablets. And now, in addition to that revenue, he also has another stream of revenue as he is teaching other people, especially pastors, how to do the exact same thing, how they can get into this type of a business of their own. And so we love the work that our guest Daniel Bryan is doing, both in his service-based business and now in his information-based business, where he's doing coaching and teaching on all of this. And we are certain that you're going to be encouraged by this conversation. So welcome to the show. Let's go ahead and get this episode going. Let's do it. Well, Daniel, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the Entree Pastors Podcast, man. Welcome to the show.
Hey, it's good to be here.
Tell us, where in the world are you talking to us from this morning? Where do you call home?
I live in Terre Haute, Indiana, right on the Indiana-Illinois border.
Okay. How long have you been a pastor, Daniel?
I've been a pastor going on 11 years this year.
Did you grow up always wanting to be a pastor? Was that always the plan for you?
No, I didn't. My dad's a pastor, so I grew up watching my dad pastor, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to do that.
Which is why you didn't want to be.
Exactly. I went to school actually with the intention of becoming a doctor, and then I had a very loving chemistry professor tell me I wasn't cut out for it, and so I ended up back on the track to ministry because I couldn't deny it. God had a calling on my life. I love people. And honestly, if you meet my dad, you would say, oh, hey, that's Daniel's dad. And so it was kind of in the cards. And God made it happen halfway through college. And the fun thing was I'm a Calvinist going to Arminian college. So God taught me to respect the Wesleyan Church and Arminians and whatnot. But this isn't a theology podcast, is it? So I'll leave that alone.
Well, we can talk about anything you want, but no, I have a very similar background in terms of, and Les too, to some degree. We all grew up PKs to some degree or another. And like you, I loved being in the church. I didn't want to do it for myself. Like I didn't want to lead one, and never dreamed that I would actually be doing that. So I tried my best to outrun that calling. Very grateful that God won in the wrestling match, because he won, I lost. But anyway, so you've been pastoring for 11 years, and tell me a little bit about your church, and then we'll get into some of the business and the genesis of it. Why did it begin and all of that? But tell us a little bit about the church context you're in.
Okay. Well, I've actually been a pastor for about 11 years at the same church, which is this is the church I got hired at when I came out of seminary, and I am still here now. Over the last 8 years, we started as a small church of around 70 and 80. Around 4 or 5 years, the founding pastor left, and there was just some drama in the church. Churches don't have drama. I don't know. Maybe mine's the only one that
never heard of it.
And so around year 5, I was wondering what God had for me, whether I should stay there. And then God, however your theology works, God allowed my youngest daughter to get leukemia. And so that's an interesting story. We were at a point in our life when we had a lot of opposition in the church. We weren't sure of our future for the church. And then my youngest daughter was diagnosed with leukemia, and that changed everything. I know as a pastor, I always talk about how God uses bad things for good purposes, but he used our leukemia journey of 4 years to just glue the church to us. I mean, everyone who had any thought of like complaining about the pastor, that just went out the window. And it was all team, let's get Isabel through cancer. And my youngest daughter, she's beat cancer, and she's been in remission for 3 or 4 years now. But that point was where God solidified me at the church and made it so I couldn't leave the church. And but then, of course, there's a little thing called the pandemic that happened a couple of years. I don't know if you've heard of it. But the effect of the pandemic with our church was it took a church that was already small, made it smaller. And over the last 4 or 5 years, because we're a small church and we live in an area that's kind of low income, we're struggling with income as a church. And so I elected to take multiple pay cuts. I accepted multiple pay cuts in order to make the finances work at the church for me to be able to continue being there. And again, we live, Terre Haute's a cheap place to live. So we were able to make ends meet. But I was taking pay cuts, and like probably the year before the pandemic hit, things were getting tighter. And that's kind of what led into the business. If we want to start talking about the business, or
well, one thing real quick, I want to just capture this detail. You said your wife was a teacher, right?
Yes.
That's your story. Okay. Sometimes I get confused in who all I talk to, but that's a detail from your story. Your wife is a school teacher, or was a school teacher, and you didn't necessarily want her to have to do that to, help make ends meet. I mean, say more about that if you don't mind sharing that part.
Yeah, no problem. So when I was going through seminary, I went through Dallas Seminary. When I was going through seminary, my wife put me through seminary. When we graduated seminary, we bought a house, we had a kid, we moved cross country, and I started a new job all in 1 year. I don't recommend that. Too many good things is still reason for a lot of gray hairs. But anyhow, so when my wife was a teacher, she worked like 80-hour weeks. That's just what a teacher does. And so we had a kid, and I started in ministry at the same time, and it was not going to be feasible for her to go back to what she did as a teacher, because as long as we had a kid, especially in Indiana, if she went to work as a teacher, what we were going to lose in expenses would not be recouped by the salary she can make. And so in the last 10 years, it's not been feasible. We have 2 children. In the last 10 years, it was never going to be a viable thing for her to go back to teaching, because again, what you start out making as a teacher doesn't compensate for all the extra expenses you incur in life. And because of where I was as a pastor and my pastoral salary, we were on Medicaid. And so I didn't want my wife to have to work, but also I didn't like the idea that she couldn't work in something where she could really use her skills to make a reasonable profit. So many times I feel like churches make the assumption.
Yeah, say it.
Generalize.
Say it.
What happens is churches assume that they can hire a pastor and they can pay him a certain amount with the assumption that his wife will work to cover to make things work. And I see this across my community. Churches, they get away with paying their pastor a certain amount that the pastor can't support his family on. The only way that it works is if the wife works full time. And my whole time as a pastor, I was like, no, we're not doing that. And I have no problem with my wife working. But the reality is her skill set is like 80 hours a week or nothing. And as long as we have kids, it makes a lot more sense for us to have her investing in a lot of things at home. And now she works part-time doing some things, but she's able to do work that she simply wants to and enjoys doing.
There you go.
Right now, as opposed to, again, I have a number of friends who have wives who have simply gone out in the workplace and said, I simply need to work full-time somewhere to support my husband. And I'm not knocking these jobs, but they're stuck in jobs like Walmart or a bunch of other low-end jobs that are just not really, they're not really fulfilling. They're just there to make ends meet so they can afford to be, their husband can afford to continue working as a pastor. And I love
it. Thank you for not holding back and saying that. I wanted you to share that because right now there are pastors listening to this podcast and they're nodding their head in agreement. Some of them are yelling at the radio right now. Like it's the reality for so many. And our message at Entre Pastors, we're not yelling at the church to pay their pastors more or trying to help them, pastors learn how to get paid more from the church. We have a solution, and we believe that solution is setting that pastor free to launch a business in which they can thrive, and that earning potential is lifted. But I love that you just put a finger on the pulse of that. reality of, like, in many cases, there's just an assumption that if we get the pastor, we get, the spouse thrown in for free, and we can lean into that. We can lean into the fact that, hey, their spouse is willing to go out and work and support the family, so we can pay less than a livable wage. And so I'm just done with that narrative. I'm over it, and I'm not mad at the churches. Like you say, maybe they're in a small church in a low income area. They're doing the best they can. Fair enough. But we're not going to put that burden on the weight of the spouses anymore to go out and support their ministry families so that we can make this thing work. We're going to encourage stories exactly like the one we're getting ready to unpack with you, because we think there's a much better path forward. Or set the spouses aside. Let's just go back to what you said about, again, that pastor that goes and trades their hours for dollars, working at kind of a low end job where, again, there's no dishonor in working at Walmart or McDonald's or some of these places. But pastor, I want you to thrive. I don't want you just going and working 80 hours a week so that you can barely eke out a living. I want you to thrive. There's much better ways of doing this. We see entrepreneurialism as a great solution. So let's unpack your story. And I'd love to hear about the business that you launched after kind of having enough of the pay cuts. There's not much more we can cut. And I'm not signing my wife up for 80 hours a week of working anymore. Like, tell us about the business that you launched, and start at the beginning, and we'll ask some questions along the way.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess another another thing, you can edit out or not, but I get frustrated again with people assuming the pastors are taking a vow of poverty as well. Like the
Right.
salary I was making was never going to be enough for me to save for college, save for retirement. It was never going to be enough for me to put away money for like my daughters to get married someday. It was, and so again, I want to see more pastors thrive. That's one of the reasons I do what I do, and that's what kind of led me into starting my business. Okay, so I guess to loop around, what led to me starting my business was me looking for options to make extra money. To be honest, from seminary on, I've had a passion for small businesses. I read all the major small business gurus out there. I followed Dan Miller for over a decade now. I know you guys are familiar with him.
Yep.
And so what really kind of led into where I'm at right now is the Apple Batterygate scandal, which you may or may not remember. That was back when Apple was sued for slowing down their phones.
Mm-hmm.
And people claimed that Apple was slowing down all the iPhone 6s so that people would upgrade to the iPhone 7. And it turns out they were actually slowing down the phones, and they had a good reason for that, but that's another story. My story is Apple sent an email and said, hey, we'll replace your battery for $30 just because we love you and don't want more people to sue us. And I said, oh, I want to get my battery changed. But then I looked on the map, and the closest Apple store was 90 minutes away. I could ship it somewhere, but I couldn't do it out with my phone. And so I got on YouTube and I thought, oh, this is easy. I can replace the battery on an iPhone. And so I did that. I did it for my wife, and I did it for some friends. And then I looked out there and I saw, wait a second, all these repair stores, they charge such huge margins for the repairs. And I started asking friends and family, like, hey, I'll do your repair and I'll charge you $100 less than the repair stores. But then what I also got really passionate about is so many repair stores focus on the repair. They hire techie guys. They hire people that are just into technology. And my passion is always helping solve people. I get excited about great customer service. I love Starbucks and Chick-fil-A, not just because I love coffee and chicken, but because they've mastered customer service. And I get so frustrated when you go into like a repair shop or a mechanic shop, and their focus is all about the car and the problem and not about solving your problem. And so I started fixing more and more phones for people. And I thought, hey, I can actually make a business out of this. And so I hired a marketing firm, bought a website, lost $40,000 or $50,000 in mistakes, racked up a bunch of credit card debt. And then I started figuring out how to make the business profitable after a year or two. And since then, it's been growing. Over the last couple of years, we've become the highest rated phone repair company in a 5-county area. And our town has retail repair locations with franchises, and we still do better business than all of them just out of the back. And the thing is, we do it because we simply solve problems for people. I'd said before, I mentioned this before, like I'm not a techie guy. I don't do coding. I don't love computer programming or soldering or anything. I love helping people out. I love solving problems for people. And half of what I do is I take a phone in and I just look on YouTube for how to solve it. I've done thousands of phones right now, so I'm pretty darn good at what I do. But what I simply do is I listen to people, see what their problems are, and I solve them. And I do a better job of it than anyone else. And I ask for a review, and we grow. It's pretty
And to
straightforward.
be clear, you're doing this from your home, right? You don't have a brick and mortar storefront or anything, right?
Yeah, this is a converted porch. This is a converted and enclosed porch in the back of my home. Used to be a spare bedroom, and it's just a table, an old wood table from the church behind me, some lasers and storage on the other side of me. So yeah, it's all from my home. I have about 3 or 4 people that work for me here as well. And just the crazy thing is how many people just come to my home, come to total strangers' home. But that's the power of Google reviews and whatnot.
Yeah. What do you call your business? What's your business name?
We're I Value Repair, with the I, kind of like a Apple I, small I Value Repair.
And what's your bread and butter? Is it mainly just like phone screens? Is that all you do, or do you do a whole host of other things?
We do a little bit of everything: screens, tablets, computers, but mostly it's phone screens. I mean, every American has 1 or 2 phones, and in America, screens break, like 2 screens break every second, I think it was. The reality is, no matter how tough they make the glass, and glass has improved. Like if you've got a S23 or if you've got an iPhone 14, the glass on those legitimately is better. But the problem is any glass can be broken.
Still glass.
And it's still glass. And so that's where we make the majority of our money, is in screen repair. And again, we make it there because I don't know how to solder. I don't know how to program computers. I'm not very tech savvy. I'm people savvy. And that's why we make a killing.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing some of your numbers? And if you don't want to, that's fine. But like, I just want people to understand, like, and I appreciate you sharing the realities too of like, you lost some money early on. Entrepreneurs, not everything works as we launch a business. We learn, and sometimes we pay some significant fees for that learning, that education that comes along with it. But you have figured some things out. You are profitable. Do you mind just giving kind of a ballpark of what your business produces on a regular basis?
Last year we did about $120,000 in revenue. And this year we're on track to get between 150 and 200 in revenue, between the new income streams you've added on.
That's awesome.
The coolest thing about being so again, if you run a business, you know there's a difference between revenue and profit. My wife hated that originally. It felt like I was playing with numbers. But there's a difference between revenue and profit.
Yeah.
And if I told you my profit numbers, actually would be very low meaning. What I mean is, the cool thing about running a business as a pastor is almost like you're triple dipping. Because as a pastor, you got a housing deduction, a lot of ministry expenses, but then you run a business out of your home. I've got piles of deductible expenses, so many tools, our phones, our internet, all the things. There's so many things that for a number of years, my business actually ran with 0 profit because of all the ways we were able to legally bring home money into the business, into the family, because we have a home-based business. We could run it at 0 profit for a few years because of how many ways we could and I repeat legally, because I'm not a details guy. And so there's ways I could run into accidentally do something illegal. That's why I pay for an accountant to go over my books and make sure I can stay on the straight and narrow. So legally, you can bring tons of money home, providing for your family, all while reducing your tax load if you own a small business.
I'm glad you brought that up, and we won't go deep into the weeds of this, but because if you've been doing this a while, you kind of just assume that everybody knows this. But the reality is, if you have been a W-2 wage earner your entire life and you've never owned a business, this is kind of a new concept. And so when you hear a business owner talk about, my business wasn't that profitable, it may sound like, oh, well, that doesn't sound exciting at all. But what you are failing to realize is what you just said. There are many legal ways. From a tax standpoint, it's actually kind of cool not to be that profitable, because your tax burden is much less, and you're still getting the benefit of your business paying for things that before you would have been paying for out of your own personal checking account, and so the business does some things for you, and we could do a whole podcast episode on what that is, but I'm glad you bring that up, because 6-figure total revenue doesn't mean that you're profiting that level, but it's fair to say you're doing much better through this business than you were in a situation a few years ago, taking yet another pay cut on the church side of things, figuring out how we're going to make ends meet. So I love that. One thing I want to go in just a moment, I want to talk about how you're adding a new line of revenue, because there's a business model in that I want people to hear about. But before we go there, let me back up for just a minute and tap into this. You had said before we started recording, and you kind of alluded to it just a minute ago, by talking about your passion is not necessarily technology. It's not that you wake up in the morning passionate about fixing the newest iPhone problem or whatever. Your passion is serving people. And I really want you to say more about that, because I think often our audience maybe hears like, man, unless I have this burning passion, how can I ever build a business around it? And for many pastors, their passion has been the church and the eternal work of the church. And so the thought of like, how do I build a business if I'm passionate actually about this eternal thing over here? I love that you are honestly admitting, like, I'm not passionate about the tech work that I'm doing. So how do you reconcile that? How do you stay excited about a business when you readily admit, I'm not really passionate about fixing people's screens?
Okay, well, a couple of answers to that. First of all, I am an Apple fanboy. So part of the reason that I started my business was so I could buy all the latest iPhones without my wife complaining. So
nice. Love it.
So there is something I like. I love holding technology. So I'll be the first one to say it. I get joy out of this. I do.
Okay.
But I don't scroll the schematics of iPhones just for kicks and giggles. I don't watch soldering videos. I only do that for solving a problem. So when it comes to talking about kind of passion, years ago, I read a book by Rabbi Daniel Lapin, and he wrote the book, Thou Shalt Prosper. And it changed how I thought. Because before that, I thought of rich people making a lot of money and they're taking it from others. And he wrote a story. He shared a simple story. He said, okay, say there's an apple at the market. You could go to the market and pay 50 cents for the apple and bring it home and eat the apple. Or if you didn't want to go to the market, you could have you pay someone else 50 cents to go to the market and bring the apple to you. And what Rabbi Daniel Lapin pointed out is that in that instance, you've created value for someone else. You didn't take money from anyone. You created value when there wasn't any value. And in that's how money is created. And so what I see myself doing in phone repair is I create value for people. I have people coming late at night and early in the morning with a big problem. Their phone is broken. They can't contact their loved ones. So I give them a loaner phone. I get them set up to fix their phone. They need a screen protector, but screen protectors are a pain in the butt to put on. So I charge them $20 for a $1 screen protector, not because I'm taking money from them, but because I'm adding value to their life. There's so many areas. And so Rabbi Daniel Lapin's book on creating value shaped how I thought of doing ministry, because it's tempting to stop and say, okay, how can I charge for serving people? I want to tell everyone about the tremendous love of God and the gospel of Jesus Christ. But what I found in 10 years is that I actually minister to as many or more people through my phone repair business than I do as a minister, because whenever I come to people with my pastor hat on, there's always defenses that get put up. But the nice thing about running a business, especially a service business, is people actually come to me, ask me for my advice, and they listen to my advice with rapt attention. That doesn't always happen as a pastor.
Right.
But the reality is, in this room, I've prayed with people. I've gotten people to come to church. I've heard people's life stories. People come and they just talk. And I tell everyone I'm a pastor. I don't hide that, but I'm helping them here, and I'm showing them love in a practical way. And I that serves what I do as a pastor in so many ways.
Yeah. If Les and I had $1 for every time our podcast guests have said they have just as much, if not more, ministry opportunity through their business platforms than the ministry itself, we could buy us all a nice steak dinner today. So we hear it all the time. So I love that. And I'm grateful that you shared that. So now,
and Daniel,
go ahead.
if I can just add this, John, that's the deal. I think many people, I was going to say, probably most of the people that we talk with, that feel as though there's something else. Like there's just something I'm missing. There's something else. They do all this work and it's all this drama in their own minds. They're well-meaning, but they're trying to come up with something because they have no, air quotes, if we're doing that, they have no marketable skills. And are you kidding me? The fact that you love people, you want to serve people, you listen to people, and you probably consume content, you read, you research, all of those, man, will serve you well in lots of things, but specifically in a service-based business like what you're talking about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
One thing I want to say too, and then you can add on to this, Daniel. Let's talk about that service-based business for a minute, because one of the things that we see a lot with our community is pastors in the church world lean heavily into their speaking, their writing, their communication. So when they then think about launching a business, there's a natural tendency to want to build it around those things. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But sometimes building out a professional coaching business or a professional speaking business is a little bit of an uphill thing if you're just starting from scratch, versus a service-based business. As I was saying to you earlier, if I could convince more pastors to jump into a service-based business model, I think they would find revenue much quicker. Now, there's an element of the coaching that we're getting ready to get into where you are going to be, and currently are, using some of your more church skills, if you will, as you're starting to teach this now to other people. But I just want to highlight and maybe celebrate service-based business for a moment. And it's not all out building, construction and, hard, sweaty work. Like, you're doing this in the air-conditioned comfort of your home, but it's still a service. You're providing a valuable service to people. So anyway, I could preach on that for a while, but I want to celebrate that and highlight that.
Yeah, you're right. It's a real need that people have, and you step into that need, solve a problem for them. I think one of the biggest things that pastors have to get over, the biggest thing that I had to get over was making sure I was charging enough. I think you go from wanting to give away your ministry, and then I have to remember, okay, I need to charge what this service is really worth. And I had to really bring my prices up, because I was realizing how much value I was adding to people's lives. And so I had to raise my prices. And that's something I had to wrestle with as a pastor.
Awesome. Tell me more about that. One thing we say a lot around here is we think pastors in church ministry have been taught to devalue their results, their time, their work. As you said, we just give it away because it's ministry, it's for the Lord. And then we put on our business hat and realize, if I do that, I go out of business pretty quickly. So tell me more about your journey into that. How long did you really struggle with that? And what was it that helped you kind of push through and go, no, I'm going to charge a fair price for what I'm doing. I'm going to get paid for what I'm worth in this.
Yeah, that's a good question. So at the beginning, when I was building my business, I was scared that I needed to really price compete. And honestly, when you're building any business, you do have to price compete a little bit if you have no reputation. But I was always trying to say, okay, I'm going to save people and work on saving people money. And a lot of times my price competition was out of fear, where I was afraid if I don't compete on price, if I don't cut my prices, I'm not going to win this business. And that's a legitimate concern a lot of business owners face. And the solution I found I was just making sure I got a regular stream of leads so I could be okay with that. But you're right. There is a sense as a pastor where it's almost like it's hard for a pastor to, in most churches, to make a lot of money, to have any conspicuous display of wealth, because people very quickly start thinking of celebrity wealthy pastors that everyone's complaining about. Right. And so I think my journey to charging more was a number of actually customers as they're sitting in here talking. I was talking to them about how much I charged for an iPhone 7 battery replacement, which at that time was like $60 I was charging, because it's a relatively cheap part. And the guy who was a manager at an aircraft factory nearby, he was like, you should charge $100 for this because it's your time and people are looking at whether they're going to replace the phone or not. And when I started thinking about it, and I started bringing up what I do everything across the board, I started to think of it in terms of the value I'm adding to people's lives. And it helped me to shift how I think about things. It was always a conversation with people in my church. That was a delicate thing. Running a business on the side was always, for the last several years, was a delicate balance with making sure my church still felt like I was prioritizing them, still felt like I was valuing them. I guess one part of my church story I didn't cover is last year, because of pandemic shrinkage and whatnot, our financial numbers were in such a place that we needed to cut my salary significantly, like take out $1,500 a month and make my position a part-time position. And we talked a lot throughout the whole last year as to what we should do, whether I should go look for another position at another church or take the pay cut. And I had to ask the church leadership, are you trying to tell me to leave by cutting my salary, or do you really want me to stay? And after they convinced me they actually did want me to stay, we talked about it, and I was able to take that pay cut and stay part-time as a pastor and just be supported more fully by my business after that. And from January going forward, now I'm a part-time pastor. But the best thing about that is it's easier for me to talk about my business now, because everyone knows, oh, hey, the pastor has work to provide.
I think I know the answer. Did your business grow as a result of pouring more fuel on that?
Yeah, it's definitely grown. Grown. Now, the challenge is I'm still, 4.5 months into figuring out what in the world does a part-time pastor look like. That's a joke. But but the really helpful thing, the best thing about being a part-time pastor, though, is it really helps with volunteer motivation, getting people to volunteer, because people see, oh, Daniel has to work to provide for his family, therefore he can't clean the church and run the children's ministry and preach on Sunday at the same time.
Yeah. Daniel, what I love about your story is the fact that you had that conversation with your church and you defined it. Here's where annoys me with, and I'm painting with a broad brush, there's a lot of exceptions, but in general, what annoys me in the church world is that churches pay their pastors a part-time salary, but they call it full-time, because as you mentioned, it is hard in pastoral ministry. Like, there really is no such thing as a part-time pastor. It is a full-time calling. You feel the weight and the burden of that 24/7, even though you shouldn't necessarily be on the clock 24/7. There really is no such thing as a true part-time pastor, and yet churches often pay their pastors part-time. And so what I am a proponent of is I often tell pastors, like, ask forgiveness, not permission. Like, don't go to your board and ask them. I love the fact that you had that conversation. And if pastors are bold enough, I think that's a great way to go, to just say, hey, listen, let's just be honest and call this salary what it is. It's part-time. And I'm going to go work another business over here so that I can provide well for my family. What irks me is when you've got pastors trying to balance that tension or manage that tension of, like, how do I navigate this whole thing of having a business and being in the church world when the church isn't paying them well enough to begin with, and then yet has this expectation of, who do you think you are, pastor, to go launch a business? Don't you know you're our full-time pastor? So I love the fact that you defined it, and now you can just fully go and throw yourself into your business. and still produce results for your church, because I know you are. And that's the thing.
Mhm.
There are some lazy pastors out there, but most pastors give and give and give because they are bought in fully to the mission and the calling that they sense of God upon their life. People don't need to, make them punch a time clock for them to produce results in the church. So anyway.
Two brief thoughts to respond to that. One is my church has actually grown since I've gone part-time as a pastor. We're actually growing this year. So I don't know what that says about my pastoring. But the second thing is, the biggest thing a mentor taught me when I got into ministry was to be really pragmatic and practical when talking about money. And so my conversation with my church wasn't actually just one conversation, it was so many.
Yeah.
But it was lots of conversations where I would literally take my family budget to a board meeting to talk about my salary and say, hey, this is our budget. This is how this is what we're spending money on. Ergo, and for the years I was working quote unquote full time yet growing my business, as I would say, hey guys, I'd be very pragmatic in conversations, lots of them, be able to say, hey, this is what I'm being paid. This is what we need to live off of. That's why I'm building a business.
Yeah.
And those are hard. I know a lot of friends of mine and people I talk to are scared to have those conversations because they're not sure how the church react, and a lot of churches won't react well. But I found from the very beginning, even before I took the job at the church, I had conversations like, hey, the salary you're offering me is a part-time salary when I took the position. And then 2 years in, I said, hey, if you pay me $13,000 more, I'll come on full time. And the whole way through, money has been a open topic we've talked about. And that's what's
good.
Made my transition helpful.
It's just funny, you mentioned that figure 13K more and I'll be full time. And it's like, I'm connecting the dot for our audience. There's 1 month in your business of revenue, of being a business owner. So again, you're making the point that earning potential is much greater when you're out in the marketplace than inside the church world. And just we think very differently once we can get out of that paradigm of working full time for the church. So let's talk about where you're shifting gears a little in your business. You continue to provide the service, but now you're doing what again we're huge fans of, and that is you are going to show other people how to do this. You're going to create, I don't know that we'd call it passive revenue because you're still actively working to build this revenue, but you're going to build a new stream of income into your business, not just by doing the work, but by teaching and coaching and showing others how you did it and how you're doing it. So tell us a little bit about that and how you're, tell us all about the program, what you call it, how people can get involved in it. And I'll hit you with some follow-up questions, but paint that picture for us.
Okay. Yeah, I'm really excited about this because, again, I love helping people more than just fixing phones and fixing devices. And I always get so frustrated when I see either pastors not making enough or people not doing meaningful jobs. And I provide for my family while I spend time with my family. I fix phones at the dinner table. I hang out with my family at night, and people bring revenue. Here, speaking of making profit, our church invested like 3 months and hundreds of hours to do a yard sale last Saturday, and we brought in $3,000, which was great. I spent the day at the yard sale. And then I came home and I made about $1,000 in about an hour of work on phones. And so there's just the earning potential, 80 to 100 hours into a yard sale, $3,000, came home, made $1,000 in about an hour, working on phone. So what I'm excited about is we've launched what's called Screen Repair Business Academy. It's a beast of a name, but the idea is I teach people how to repair screens and turn that into extremely profitable businesses. So the way the program works is a combination of all the best aspects of online programs. If you're someone that likes watching videos and following checklists, there's 8 weeks of videos on how to build everything how to do everything I did in 6 years. You can learn in 8 weeks how to launch your own screen repair business, how to fix phones, how to deal with customers, how to do your taxes, all that stuff, videos, playbook. And then we do not one-on-one coaching, group coaching, where we meet every week with my team. We do live repairs, we answer questions. I do tech support. I'm really hands-on working with other guys. Most of the guys I have right now in my program are actually guys in ministry already. And I work with them to talk about the ins and outs of how to start a business just like mine, because I've made a lot of mistakes and I've learned a lot. And honestly, if someone works with me, they can cut out that 6 years of learning and just start right off the bat.
Yeah, I love that. And so it's an 8-week program. Do you mind sharing the cost on here? Or do you want to wait till people come through at your funnel and learn more about it before you share the price tag on that?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't mind sharing. The cost of the program is $1997, really. And some people respond with a certain degree of sticker shock, and they're like, "Whoa, that's a lot of money." And yes, it's a lot of money, but my average profit on a phone is between $100 to $110 per phone. I do 50 to 60 phones on average in a week. And with what I can teach people, they can double their money in 8 weeks or 4 months, depending on how much effort they put into it.
And that's why, Daniel, that's why I wanted to ask about if you minded sharing the price, because part of your promise is you will double your money. You guarantee it. I will help you double your money if you actually like work the program and do it. So I want to push back gently. Well, it's not even gonna be gentle. It's a hard pushback on what you just said a minute ago, where you said, "Man, that's a lot of money." I want to because I don't believe it is a lot of money, and I want to just crush that mindset in our audience, where a pastor here, and I know why they think that, because for them that's a month's salary for some, and so they go, "Oh, that's a lot of money." I want you to stop thinking that way, that $2,000 is a lot of money as an investment into a business that has the potential to bring in, 10, 20, 30 times that investment in a year or more, So anyway, I'm passionate about it because we run into this mindset often with our community, and it's the very thing that's holding most of our listeners back from really moving forward and thriving, is that mindset. "Oh, that's a lot of money." I get why you think that. So let's get you to a place where $2,000 isn't a lot of money anymore. So feel free to respond.
Okay, here's a couple of thoughts. And you're right. It's perception is everything. Now, those of you that are on YouTube, you may be able to see what's behind me, but over my shoulder is a boxing machine that's a laser. And 3 years ago, I prayed, hemmed and hawed and everything about it. And I spent $1,800 to buy this laser. And I was like, that's going to kill me, that expense. But when I started to use it for the job that I did in my business, it paid for itself in 45 days. And ever since it pays for itself, every time I use it, it makes me around $130 in profit. I use it multiple times a week now. Beside the laser is a screen protector machine that puts screen protectors on phones, custom made, $800 investment. I had to spend $1,000 to get it from China. Scary big investment, but it routinely makes me $40 to $80 per day. That kind of really practical investment. So you're right. We do need to reframe our thoughts and expenses. I've got things all over my shop. I've spent thousands of dollars on things. I've wasted a ton of money, but the things I'm talking about are things the things I can teach people on is things when you invest in something that you know is going to create value, it's not a sunk cost. It's not a waste. It's not I don't want to compare it to, I can't think of a waste to compare it to, but the reason I can guarantee that is because it's a very transactional. It's a transactional industry. People, 2 phone screens break every second in America.
Just math. It's just math, Daniel. It's not math. Get out of the drama and arguing with yourself, everybody. It's just numbers. It's just math. It's demonstrably, there's evidence out there, and it's readily available. You've seen it in your own life. And really that's the bottom line, is that these things are actually very provable. And I would go a little bit further and say, if someone is not willing to make that small investment in themselves, it's not in you. You're fine. You don't need it. But in themselves, they're really not all that serious about getting out of the lifestyle and the hole that they're in.
Yeah. And just know this, Daniel, my pushback wasn't to you. It's to that need of why is there that need to immediately go, I know it's a lot, because we know who we're speaking to, right? We know our audience, and this isn't a put down. This is me kind of stepping into that coaching role, that inspirational role, calling our listeners to a better place. Like we've seen the mountaintop. We can help you get to that place, and you don't have to stay stuck in it where you were in the early part of your story, in a already small church that's starting to experience more setbacks and limitations. Like there's so much better for you, pastor. So anyway, Daniel, just know that I'm not pushing back against you. Like I think what you've built is incredible. I love how you're packaging this new line of revenue around your Screen Repair Business Academy. I love the name. I don't think it's a mouthful. I think it's awesome. And I would encourage any pastor that's been desiring a new stream of revenue, for their family, but not really sure, like maybe they don't have this passionate, clear idea for what their business is. This would be worth looking at. Like seriously, you could probably learn how to do this from your own home. And Daniel's a perfect guy to show you how to do it, to coach you through the process. And just imagine, Pastor, what would it look like if 8 weeks from now you have a business that's bringing in a few grand a month, that Daniel's walking beside you, helping you figure this out. Like, so I love everything about what you're doing, man. So I would highly encourage, if someone wants to connect with you and, jump into your program, how do they find you? Where do they go to connect?
That's a great question. You can go to screenrepairbusinessacademy.com and find me there. You can find me on Facebook. I'm Daniel Allen Bryan. Those are the two main areas. My main website is being rebuilt right now. But yeah, search screenrepairbusinessacademy.com or Screen Repair Business Academy on Facebook, and you'll find a lot of information about me.
Also, I'll let our audience know that Daniel is in our Entre Pastors Connect, our Facebook group. So jump in. You can connect with him inside of there as well. So lots of ways to get in touch with you. Is there any question, Daniel, that you were hoping I asked you that I did not ask you? Like, are we leaving anything on the table here that needs to be discussed?
Not that I can think of right now.
Awesome. Les, you got anything else before we wrap things up today?
Daniel, I love your business. I also love your heart for ministry. You're just definitely part of our tribe. I know that so many people are probably where you were just a couple of years ago that are listening to this, and really encouraging to see the progress that you've made and your willingness to help others. So, man, good to meet you. Great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being available.
Likewise. Good to be here.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the Entre Pastors Podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the Entre Pastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our Entre Pastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own Entre Pastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.